Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another OurWhisky tasting with me, Becky Paskin. I'm the founder of OurWhisky, and I'm thrilled to have you all back again for our regular monthly tasting. And oh my goodness, I'm so excited for you to try the two whiskies in this month's tasting pack. We've got a real treat for you, a focus on Irish single pot still, which is one of my all-time favorite styles of whiskey. And it's a little bit different this time around because we've actually got two whiskies you may not have tried. I'm hoping that some of you haven't tried some of these. I've really gone to great lengths to try and source some whiskies that are interesting for you. But these are two Irish single pot stills from relatively new distilleries. So stay tuned. We're going to be digging through those tasting packs very shortly. Hello, everyone. Really lovely to see some familiar names come into the live tasting. Hi, Tabby. Hello, Andrew. Lovely to see you. Alistair's here, of course. I was about to say, it is, of course, pancake day, and I haven't had any pancakes yet either. But it did cross my mind earlier how awesome a whiskey syrup would be to pour over some delicious pancakes. Let me know, how do you like to enjoy your pancakes for Pancake Day? I can see Tabby. Oh, there you go. See, on it already. Just had pancakes covered in butter, maple syrup, and mellow corn. Oh my God, that sounds so good. Do you stir the mellow corn into the syrup, Tabby, or do you just pour it on top like you're drowning your pancakes in whiskey? Let us know how you all love to enjoy your pancakes. I think for me, I'd go savoury, actually. I'm more of a savoury kind of girl. I think, something with mushrooms and cheese, you can't go wrong with that. A little bit quesadilla style, I think is going to be my kind of favourite. Alistair says uses Aaron, have I got the right? Aaron Gold on pancakes. Okay, someone's got taste. Delicious. Okay, so I'm quite pleased that we've maybe hit the nail on the head here, that Andrew has not tried either of these whiskies tonight, so I'm really pleased with that. And Tabby has had the writer's tears, but not the Teeling, so I'm super pleased because I know you're a Teeling fan, so I'm really pleased to hear that we've got a new one for you. Okay, so before we get into the tasting, just a couple of things. Obviously, I'm so pleased that all of you are here and joining us, and back again for another OurWhisky tasting. Anyone who's watching along, if you haven't got a tasting pack, don't worry. Go and grab a dram anyway. You can watch along, enjoy this live stream. We're going to have two guests come in who are going to talk us all through Irish single pot still whiskey. We'll talk about the background, what makes it so unique, and what the future of this style is. So grab a dram anyway, settle in, enjoy yourselves. As you know, every single month we like to give something back to all of our members. So you could be in with a chance of winning a bottle of whiskey from the previous month's tasting pack. And all you have to do is be an OurWhisky subscriber. So obviously sign up to OurWhisky, be a member, be active in some of our tastings, and then post about your OurWhisky experience on social media. I love seeing all of your photos and the videos of your tasting packs, your setups. Some of you love drinking your whiskies with this on a massive TV screen, which is amazing. Although I wouldn't want to be in the room to see my big face on someone's TV screen. I just love seeing all of your photos of you trying your whiskies and getting involved. So please post about it on social media. It helps us spread the love a little bit. Enables us to put on more tastings like this for you. And then, of course, tag us in your photos as well. If we don't see it, then we're not going to be able to see your entry. So those three things, and you could be in with the chance of winning a bottle of whiskey from the previous pack. Now, last year, I'm getting ahead of myself. Last month, we tasted Necknean and Isle of Raasay, both amazing whiskies. Unfortunately, I actually didn't see very many entries for those two, so I've had to go back a month further to find this month's winner. And drum roll, please, because a bottle of whiskey is winging their way to Poppy Mackenzie Smith. Congratulations, Poppy. I hope you're feeling so much better. and I'm so pleased that you're enjoying your OurWhisky experience with us so far. These were two of the whiskies from, I think it was this December's pack, so Bowmore 18-year-old and Tamju Kirkus Distinction 2. Poppy, if you're watching this, say hello, let me know which of last month's whiskies you would like, either the McNean or the Isle of Rasay, and we'll get a bottle sent out to you. Okay, right, without further ado, I think it's time we say hello to our guests. Let's welcome them in. Please say a big hello to Clare Minnock, who is Marketing Director for Writers' Tears. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Becky. Hi, guys. Nice to see everyone and enjoy this great evening ahead of us with everyone. Very excited to share our whiskey and learn from Rob about the Teeling one. So looking forward to it.
Can't wait to dive into this Writer's Tears. I'm a huge fan already. I've tried a few before from the range, but not this particular style. So really excited for everyone else to try it as well. Thanks for joining us, Claire. And also my second guest, please say a big hi to Rob Caldwell, who is the brand ambassador for Teeling. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Becky. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this. It's been a long time, and I'm glad that we could have this chat.
I'm really glad that you're here. And it's funny because we were just saying off air before we went live how rare these things are now. Actually, like we did loads of them during lockdown, but I still think they have a place in like our exploration and enjoyment of whiskey. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, like, it's fantastic you're doing this, and I'm very appreciative because, yeah, I mean, sure, 2 years ago there were a dime a dozen, but they all fell away. And yeah, you can't beat a room full of whiskey fans drinking good whiskeys, but also when it comes to discovering new whiskeys, I think the value of doing something like this, can't be understated. The idea of, like, I live 40 minutes outside of Dublin, so if I was to go to Dublin city centre where, most things happen in Ireland, I've got to figure out probably accommodation and transport. Whereas this, in the comfort of my own home, I get to try some fantastic whiskies and then head downstairs for a snack. That's done.
Well, I like a snack with my whiskey as well. It's one of those things. Is like, I live in Brighton. I don't live in London. I don't live in Edinburgh or the centre of Dublin or something like that. And it's not always easy to find the interesting bottles, and even then you have to buy a whole bottle or going to you have to go to a whiskey bar. And we've got a great one down here called Cut Your Wolf Loose, and it's wonderful, but they don't have regular releases. It's all single cask stuff. It's quite difficult to find really interesting whiskies to just dissect and sip over. So that was a frustration of mine, and I just hope that in building our whiskey we can help bring a nice diverse mixture of whiskies to everybody at home. So thanks also to everyone for being a member and joining in as well, and hopefully you're all enjoying the whiskies, the selection too, because they are hand-picked. I promise they are all they're all hand-picked by me. I do take care with that, so I hope you're all enjoying them. That on that note, with that sound means that we're going to move into the tasting portion, which is what I know you're all here for. So Claire, I guess we're going to say goodbye to you just for now. And Rob, just going to ask you to talk a little bit as I pour myself a dram of Teeling Wonders of Wood, which we have in our tasting packs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Irish single pot still whiskey, because both of these whiskies today are this unique style of Irish whiskey that nowhere else in the world can make. It's uniquely Irish. Why is it? What is it, and why is it so special?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Look, my job, I get to travel the world and drink whiskey. It's a terrible time, as you know. But no, I really enjoy it. But easily the most common question I get asked, no matter where it is what's the difference between Irish and Scottish whiskies? And sure, we can be nerdy and go into the intricacies and slight differences and productional kind of variations between the two, which isn't all that great to be honest. But the easy answer is single pot still. Both countries make both peated and unpeated and triple distilled and double distilled single malts and grains and everything else and blends, but only one makes single pot still. So for me, as an easy answer, having a uniquely Irish style of whiskey in this very rapidly evolving and emerging and growing Irish whiskey category, it's really interesting to have that unique point of difference. Because yeah, we'll always draw a comparison in the single malt category to single malt Scotch, and the same with grain to a lesser extent to American whiskies. But to have that unique style of Irish whiskey is something really interesting, and we one day would like to see it as diverse as single malt. But as we know, the whiskey industry is a marathon, not a sprint, and it'll probably happen well after we've gone. And that's the romance of the whiskey industry, I guess. But in terms of the category, so it's a link back to, you know, even a time before we used the term single, like single malt and single pot still. Dublin whiskey was once the biggest whiskey in the world, probably due to the urban distilleries and so many in one space. There was almost like an industrialization of the whiskey making process where they weren't making brands. You know, wine merchants were in charge of bottling, blending, maturation. It was the distillers just taking mash bills from whatever they could get their hands on. It was an economic sustainability, and they were using everything from you know, barley, both malted and unmalted, and peated, and different grains, whatever they could grow, because some of it was, you know, being shipped out of the port city that was Dublin at that time. So it was less about, you know, recipes and maintaining brand identity and flavor DNA and things like that, and more about what they could get their hands on. And a number of reasons, you know, kind of led to unmalted barley being pretty common across the board. This was only kind of exacerbated by something introduced by the English called the malts tax, essentially stating that if you use malted barley in your whiskey or your distillate, you paid tax equivalent to the amount you used. So the Irish, you know, ever trying to avoid English tax, started to use more and more unmalted barley, inadvertently creating their own uniquely Irish style of whiskey, which became known as pure pot still. Again, pre-single as a prefix. Unmalted barley, for those newbies there, essentially it's just a barley seed. You know, plant it in the ground, the cell wall breaks down, and it grows into a barley plant. What maltsters did, what brewers and distillers did, was trick that same thing, unmalted barley, into thinking it was going to become a plant, thus releasing more sugars and starches, which, as we know, are the gold dust when it comes to creating alcohol. So that created malt, and then obviously dried, and, you know, go from there into peat and all that. But yeah, this unmalted barley kind of became a characteristic of the flavor of pure pot still Irish whiskey. So now today, fast forward a few hundred years, European Commission has gifted us our own GI or technical file around what is single pot still Irish whiskey today, and that is known for a measure at least 30% of unmalted barley in the distillate. So 30% minimum unmalted barley, 30% minimum malted barley. So you can obviously play with those ratios. You get 5% of other grains, which is a whole rabbit hole we don't need to go down today.
And that can include anything from like corn and oats, wheat, rye.
Yeah, so it's exciting. And then obviously we've got the wealth of casks then to use within that kind of ratio and to play with. So it is exciting. You know, we're only just scratching the surface of the category, as we've talked about in the past. You know, one kind of group run a lot of the single pot still out of Ireland, but now we're seeing brands like Teeling, Writer's Tears, and obviously many others starting to delve down into that category and start to release some really, really interesting, weird, wonderful, and very tasty single pot stills as this category grows.
And what is it that, like, what does, if you could describe how single pot still whiskey inherently differs from single malt? Because it's, let's say it's 50-50 malted and unmalted barley, it's still barley. So how does that differ from a single malt, which is 100% barley as well?
So from a flavor perspective, I kind of put it like this: like unmalted barley, very green, very stringent. I think, like, I kind of think of it like this: think of a pear that's been in a fruit bowl, and you take a bite, and you could have waited one more day. It's a little green, it curls up, you know, your gum a little bit. It's just that little bit kind of sour, bitter, nice, but probably could have waited one more day. Think of that same pear that's been in the fruit bowl for 4 days. You know, same sugars, just a lot browner, a lot more stewed, you know, different stages of its life cycle. So yeah, the unmalted barley tends to veer more towards the oily, green astringency of that kind of flavor that I was kind of leaning towards. So yeah, think of like the skin of a green apple, a ripe pear, little bit of astringency of say Calvados or brandy, as opposed to kind of that rich, dark, deep fruits that we kind of see in some malts. So yeah, a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more orchard fruits, which is great for Irish whiskey, as people kind of tend to be the flavors that people are reaching for Irish whiskey anyway. But yeah, predominantly green, oily are the two big flavor components that people attribute to single pot stills so far.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, for me, it's a textural thing. The oiliness really lends itself to this style of whiskey. I don't know what it does. It has that astringent element to it, but then somehow when it's in cask, all of that it's just the way that it matures is just so different, and I can't explain why. And then there's also like a spiciness to it that I always find with Irish single pot still too, which we think of spice as being something that comes from the cask, from maturation, or even from a high ABV distillate when it comes off in terms of the cut points when the spirit comes off the still. But anyway, I am rambling because Irish single pot still is one of my absolute favorites, and there's all of these like weird and wonderful magic around how it creates this beautiful oily.
You're spot on, and that becomes the difficulty of, like, you've got this lovely spicy distillate. Now the question is always going to be, all right, what cask do we put it in? You know, in this world where we're using hundreds of different casks in the maturation of whiskeys from around the world, how do we best exemplify, you know, this category? How do we pay homage to the past of pure pot still, but also bring the category forward to a modern whiskey consumer? So that was our biggest discussion point was, you know, what cask do we use? And typical Teeling, we put it into a bunch. We put it into at least 50. So same distillate into so many different casks, just to see, all right, what does that do to this? What does that do to this? And then how do they interplay with one another, and how can they evolve or you know, highlight the category in a lovely way? So that was part of the fun, that exploration.
So exciting to see how this Wonders of Wood series plays out. So I know some of you are tasting already, and we're going to get to the whiskey in a second, I promise. This Wonders of Wood series is really interesting, I think, because you're taking this single pot still distillate, which, you know, bearing in mind, Teeling is the first distillery in Dublin for 125 years. Is that right?
Yeah. As we know, like, distilleries all but disappeared from the island of Ireland. We went from 200 down to 2. 1976, there were 2 distilleries in Ireland, one in Middleton in County Cork and one in Antrim in Bushmills, none in Dublin. And then after 125 years, Teeling was the first new one in a long period of time, producing the first Dublin distillate in almost 50 years. So yeah, a bit of historical significance there, and interesting, but the boom, you know, it's just exploded. You know, like I said, 2 distilleries in 1976. 4 in the 90s, 6 in 2015 with Teeling, and now we're at 50, and that changes seemingly every day, which is really, really, really exciting to see.
So the last time I checked, it was around 30, and now you're saying 50. I'm like, what happened? It just keeps going up, and I just can't keep track.
Exactly.
I'm gonna bring up a few pictures of Teeling now, and I think Tabby mentioned earlier in the chat that when you get to Dublin, particularly back when Teeling opened, and it was the only real distillery in Dublin that you could go and visit, it's a stunning building in itself, but the visitor experience is wonderful, and being able to walk around the distillery too is just such a treat. I think for anyone visiting Dublin, you wouldn't get that experience anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, that's what kind of set us apart in the beginning, was just that focus on production. You know, we didn't want to be a pseudo experience. We really wanted to bring people through a working distillery, warts and all. I think that's what kind of set us apart at the beginning, and certainly allows us to kind of have that unique point of difference, you know, against the very well-established Jameson Bow Street. So yeah, it was just how can we showcase what we're doing. You know, at Teeling, it's focusing and challenging ourselves and the conceptions around what whiskey can be at every aspect of the production or process of making whiskey. So using different mash bills, different yeast strains, double distilling, triple distilling, all these different casks. So how do we just showcase a little bit of that in the short 30 to an hour that we have with each of our guests? Pre-COVID, you know, that was up to 100,000 a year. Obviously, last couple of years put a bit of a dent in that, but it's bigger better than ever, with so many people, being trapped in their houses for so many years, like, get me out, and they're coming to Ireland in droves, which is absolutely great to see.
And so you produce a variety of different styles of whiskey at Teeling Distillery. A lot of the expressions you've put out so far have contained sourced whiskey from other distilleries, just matured whiskey while you're waiting for your own to come to fruition. What have we seen that's come from Teeling itself?
Yeah, so that's the exciting thing. So right now we're in that integration process. So we built the distillery in 2015. The whiskey turned 3 in 2018. You mentioned the Cooley distillery. So the family used to own another distillery. So they inherited Jack and Stephen Teeling, the owners of the Teeling Whiskey Company. They inherited tens of thousands of barrels. But yeah, the exciting thing is we've made more in Dublin than we ever began with at the start. And a lot of that is now, 6, 7, 8 years old. So we've released a few. The more mainstream is the pot still. So the pot stills, all the pot stills are from Dublin. So there's 3 now, the core release pot still and the 2 Wonders of Wood, the Chinkapin and the Virgin Portuguese Oak. The malt component of our blend is from Dublin. The single malt is from Dublin. The peated single malt, Black Pits, is from Dublin. We did a cask strength version, which was double distilled there, that was only available in Ireland, unfortunately. Apologies. A very, very nice example of both the triple distilled and double distilled peated single malts. But yeah, all of those from Dublin. And then we've got a few kind of single casks and weird and wonderful things. Pot still in a Chateau Becquierville red wine cask that you can only buy in the distillery. Little things like that. But yeah, the integration process is well underway as we integrate that Dublin distillate into our existing portfolio, so we can keep some of the older family stock aside and bring it out for special occasions and super rare experiences, but also focus on what we're creating in Dublin.
Nice. Well, now everyone's gotten carried away tasting this delicious whiskey already, so we better catch up with them, Rob. You mentioned just then that the Wonders of Wood series, there have been 2 releases. So the first one was matured in Virgin Chinkapin oak, which is a species of American white oak. I would describe it as having like a nuttiness to it, the Chinkapin. And that one actually won Best Single Pot Still at the World Whiskies Awards. Is that right?
Yeah, it did. Really, really exciting to win that. Obviously puts a bit of a spotlight on the single pot still category. We allow ourselves to win that one. It was the Wonders of Wood. So I'll grab the bottle there. So that's this one. So yeah, winning world's best pot still allows us not only to kind of reinvest in single pot still as a category, but also the idea of the series. So in Ireland, as some of you may know, we can use any type of woods. You look at the rules and regulations around Scotch and written by the Scotch Whisky Association, very strict and stringent, because, at that time when they were written, you didn't want other countries to create something called single malt Scotch. Fair. The Irish kind of were on its knees at that time and kind of copied and pasted in a very Irish-like way, and copied and pasted the minimal, the bare facts. So that the most funny one for me is, the Scotch Whisky Association says has to be aged in oak for 3 years, influenced by this, and this. And the Irish one says it's got to be aged in wood. That gives us a lot of flexibility. So the Wonders of Wood is precisely that, single pot still in these unique casks. So like you said, Chinkapin is a strain of American oak grown in the northeast part of the country. And like you say, yeah, very resinous, almost like kind of woody. I liked your taste in it, but for me, it's a little bit more cinnamon, but I think I was a bit stupid in my younger years, and I remember the cinnamon challenge, and that kind of pulls the moisture forward. That's the kind of woodiness that I get with the one.
Made me laugh when I pressed the wrong button. Well, just remembering videos of everyone doing the cinnamon challenge. Delicious.
But yeah, I mean, when we talk about woodiness, cinnamon and cinnamon bark is a type of wood. So again, it fleshes out, when we talk about fruitiness in whiskey or spiciness, as we were earlier, there's all these subcategories within this umbrella of a term. So when we talk about woodiness, we're starting to see variations within that. So deep, dark mahogany and stone fruits, or dried kind of spicy green woods and things like that work with unmalted barley and single pot still. So it allows us to reinvest in that idea as a category. So number 2 is going to be Portuguese oak. Sorry,
Portuguese oak, Rob.
Portuguese oak from the Iberian Peninsula. Okay. There we go. That one.
There you go.
So yeah, normally used in wine and fortified ports. Very kind of deeper, darker, like we said, that a little bit kind of richer wood that we kind of expect, but almost in wine, not so much in whiskey. And again, works really well with single pot still. Hopefully lives up to the standard set by number one.
This is a really fascinating whiskey for me. And actually, do you know, because I poured this out right at the very start when you started talking, which was a long time ago. But it's been sat in my glass now, and it has changed so much just by sitting here and being open. And I know everyone who's been watching along with us, you've had this open for a while now. If you haven't gone back to it, I recommend you do, because for me, it's almost settled down. That spiciness has just had a chance to relax, and it's become a little bit more fruity. At first, I was getting that astringency that you mentioned from the single pot still, almost like when you were talking about the pears. But for me, it was more like the pips, you know, like apple pips or pear pips that are just, if you bite into them, they have this like little bitterness to it, but also slightly oily. And I had that on the nose. There was some really lovely tasting notes about it. But the whole thing's just relaxed. It's become a little bit more juicy over time. Just trying to find, here we go.
Certainly is open up, and then obviously it'll certainly hold up to a couple drops of water as well and bring out some of those kind of hidden flavor notes. Peanut. I like peanut.
It does. Do you know what? I haven't added water to it. I will do it. It is 50% ABV, so if you do want to add a drop of water and see what happens to it, then please go ahead, give it a go. Alistair also says, got green apples, a spice can't put my finger on. Cloves, I would say cloves too. Yeah. I think that's a really good shout.
Yeah, like cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, almost like a hint of anise.
Claire says she's even getting some peach now that she's added. Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to add some water and see what happens. Don't worry, I knew what you meant.
I knew I had this for a reason.
So trying to pour, I don't recommend trying to pour water from a massive glass like this into a little one. You will make a mess. I'm surprised I haven't. I'm the clumsiest ever.
It beats the one time I was doing one of these and the host got really excited and I was telling him about non-chill filtration. And I was like, why don't you just pour a little bit into the palm of your hands and rub it in like a moisturizer? You can feel the fattiness of the whiskey. And he got a little bit overexcited, poured it over his laptop, and then the Zoom went black. Uh-oh, what happened? 15 minutes later, another person for the company was like, oh, here's the new link. I'm like, what happened? Yeah, he fried his computer. I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm getting more kind of like dried orange peel, that bitter citrus orange peel. You can get slightly dry, but almost like a zest. Like this would work quite nicely in an old fashioned or a Martinez, I think. What cocktail ideas did I put down on your notes, guys? I can't remember what I put down, and I don't have them in front of me, stupidly. Let me know. And a slight tobacco-iness as well.
Ooh, yeah, that's interesting. I like so with the wealth of all these craft sodas out there, I found a really cool pink grapefruit soda that was really nice. A nice highball with a decent measure of this and pink grapefruit soda. Oh, so happy.
This is really delicious. A different side of Teeling. Sure, really nice to see the single pot still really singing in this particular type of cask. I would have really liked to taste the Chinkapin, the first one, and see how it was. Did I say Martinez? Tabby, thank you. I did. I forgot that I'd said Martinez. I was like, oh, this would work really well in a Martinez. And I put it on your tasting note cards. So there you go. Go and try it in that cocktail. Let me know what you think. How does this compare to the Chinkapin?
Like you said, I think it's a lot more like woody kind of resinous, that deeper, darker, when you think of Portuguese wines, like a lot more stone fruits. But I don't think it really comes out from, I guess, the cask that we expect. A lot of that fruitiness that we talk about with age statement whiskies influenced by port and sherry, it tends to be a lot more of that same kind of direction of flavor, those darker mahogany, red, ruby, maroon, purple flavors. but I think this is much more on the dry side of things rather than the dried fruits. So yeah, that's where I kind of go, these dry, resinous woodiness. I like to say mahogany, but it's just kind of, it sends people off in a weird direction. Because then, you're talking about weird wood and you say another weird wood, it's just confusing the messaging. But that kind of dry, resinous wood, I think works really well for sure.
Nice. This has been such a delicious whiskey. I've really enjoyed it. Tabby, I don't know if it's the power of suggestion, me saying orange oils, and now that's all you're getting aftertaste. But hey, that's what we're here for, to join a group like this and be guided, and what we're nosing, what we're tasting. I think it enriches our experience a bit more. So if you haven't joined the OurWhisky Club, then do join up, and you can have fun with your tasting notes as well. Rob, thank you for that. I'm going to bring Claire back in. Hi, Claire. Hold on, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry. I'm getting very jealous. It sounds delish. We should have organised a swap beforehand. We weren't thinking.
We should have organised a swap. I was just saying to them both as well, because you're both in Ireland, it would have been more easier for you to swap samples between the two of you than for me to get a tasting pack out. Just Ireland. It's I get a lot of messages from people overseas, particularly randomly, America, Canada and Australia and Europe. Everybody wants to take part in OurWhisky, but I just have to say no, because it's so difficult to get tasting packs out of the country, and I'm really sorry. I really wish I could, but I don't. Well, there you go, Brexit. Yay.
Yeah. But it's great to see the interest there, though. Like we were saying earlier, like it's fantastic. I think we all got a bit fed up of Zoom tastings and events over lockdown. It was overload. You could have had a couple a day, like it was too much. But now that it's kind of petered back to a normal amount, and you might have one a month or something, like it's a lovely way to explore in the comfort of your own home. As Rob was saying, without the logistics, because for us here, I'm an hour from Dublin, and basically Dublin is where everything happens. So, you really don't have the opportunity to do stuff like this if you're not in kind of the main cities. So I think it's fantastic.
Thank you, Claire. I agree. How would you Writer's Tears, if people at home aren't aware, Writer's Tears is part of the portfolio owned by Walsh Whisky. So the other whiskey in the range is the Irishman, which is also a brand that I'm a huge fan of. I love the Irishman single malt. I think it's delicious. Is it the cask strength edition or the normal one? I can't remember which one it is, but there's just so much like rich chocolatiness involved in that. And I know that you've said before, Bernard Walsh, who's the co-founder of Walsh Whisky, and also is like the master blender, the guy that selects all the casks. He has such a sweet tooth, and it's interesting to see like that is across every whiskey that I've tried from the portfolio, and maybe I've got one then as well, because I love all of the whiskies. They're delicious. But so do you as a company, does Walsh Whisky experiment with casks to the extent that Teeling does as well?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of what we do, and a huge part of Bernard's interest. So, the company was founded 24 years ago, 1999. Back, Rob says there like the number of distilleries and, Irish whiskies available back then. When Bernard brought out whiskies, it was kind of like, I have one. When you'd go into a bar, they'd say, I have one. Why do I need another Irish whiskey? Whereas now you go into a bar and they boast of having 100 Irish whiskies. Like it's phenomenal to see how it's changed in 2 decades. And I think for Bernard, that exploration has been really exciting as part of it. So, not just, I suppose, what you can do, whether it's single malt, single pot still with the kind of blends of the actual liquid, but it's for him, it's really the exploration with the casks and the influence of the wood. And really, like I should say, like the DNA across both of our brands is very sweet. Bernard has a very sweet tooth, and I suppose that's evident in some of the finishes that we've tried. So for Writer's Tears, we've brought out the first ever ice wine cask finish, which is a very, very sweet dessert wine from Canada. And if you drink that on its own, like it's very sweet. So like I wouldn't be a fan of ice wine on its own, but as a finish, what it gives to the liquid is just this lovely lightness. and a real kind of nice kind of lychee almost kind of flavor profile, and a nice sweetness to it. So you get that across a lot of them. So what we've done with the single pot still is it was originally matured in bourbon barrels, but we've brought in kind of 2 extra barrels in the maturation. So a PX sherry and a Florio Marsala. So it's got like kind of 2 nearly dessert wine type finishes almost to it that bring in, really layer in that depth and that sweetness. And you get that kind of, I suppose, real variety of flavor to it then, like, because the pot still on its own as a distillate is quite spicy, so it has that really lovely kind of ginger pepper spice to it already, and when you layer kind of sweetness in with that spice, it just gives you this fantastic, you know, experience that with water, without water, with ice, you know, leave it, as you said with the Teeling one, when you leave it kind of sit, it really opens up.
It's a really delicious. Sorry, I was listening to everything you said. I haven't even poured myself any whiskey. I'm just like, oh, this is really fascinating. I'm also going to say, give Claire a bigger share of the screen, Rob. So I'm going to put you back in the green room now. We'll bring you back out later. Don't worry, sit tight. Claire, just while I'm pouring myself a drop of this, what's interesting is that we just tasted Teeling single pot still whiskey. And as Rob mentioned, that Teeling distillery was set up by 2 brothers, Jack Teeling, who both previously worked at Cooley and decided to move over. What's interesting is that this has actually been distilled by another Teeling.
Yeah, it's keeping it in the family. We currently source our whiskies. So this particular, the single pot still, is actually sourced from Great Northern Distillery, which is John Teeling, so Jack and Stephen's father. So I mean, he has been phenomenal in terms of, I suppose, bringing back that depth of Irish whiskey and really exploring, because as Rob mentioned, in terms of, you know, the number of distilleries now is up near 50. They're all a lot are in infancy, so there is no liquid from them. So, you know, there are, I suppose, the kind of main areas or sources where people are getting liquid, and John Teeling really has been visionary in how he's kind of shaped that landscape. And I suppose for us working with Great Northern on this distillate, you know, it's a really clean distillate. We felt it was one that was, you know, very light and kind of, I suppose, almost malleable to what we wanted to do with casks, because it was, how can we explore the flavors in this? How can we kind of, you know, bring our own stamp to it? And as we've already said, like, that's the sweetness, that's the real, like, that depth of flavor and just that, I suppose, uniqueness that Bernard brings to, you know, everything. He's tasting whiskies at 9 o'clock in the morning and he's having a bun at 10 o'clock. It's very much enjoying that exploration of the flavors, which is really exciting. Like,
this is Bernard Walsh with his wife Rosemary, who is also co-founder of OurWhisky.
So they established it together back, as I said, 1999. And I suppose the journey that the company has gone on and that they've obviously gone on in the last 24 years, you know, it's very exciting to see what we're bringing out now in terms of all these finishes. The Irishman we mentioned, our other brand, you know, it was the first cask strength release in you know, more in living memory, I suppose, you know, from our kind of golden era of Irish whiskey. The Irishman brought back that cask strength, which, you know, now it's, I suppose, it's seen as, you know, there's so many cask strengths out, which is fantastic to see, because for, I suppose, Puritans, cask strength is, you know, exactly from the barrel, and then you can add your water and explore the flavors, and it's really exciting.
You know, this is a really different style of whiskey to the Teeling that we just tried. I think they've both got that kind of fragrant quality. There's a touch of oiliness and that spice is there, but apart from that, it's like they're night and day, completely different whiskies. And it's a shame you haven't got them both in front of you. Is everyone else at home watching along, if you've got both whiskies, are you finding the same? They're very different. Like, one is more fragrant, the other's much sweeter. And as there was some really lovely taste notes. Who was it? Andrew says, really juicy green gala apples. Do you know, when I just poured it, I was like, oh my God, this is like green starburst, like really juicy and sweet, like that tropical fruit kind of like the juicy fruits that you used to get, the chewing gum. Yeah. But then it kind of has settled into this more vanilla, chocolatey, dessert-like whiskey.
Yeah, I think as well you get a lot of, you know, kind of fig and raisin, like when you get that, I suppose, from the sherry. You do kind of tend to smell that as well. Like when you get, I suppose, the initial sweetness and, you know, kind of almost candied apples, you know, the toffee apples you would have had at Halloween, like you have that initial, but it really, you know, it opens up kind of the longer that you leave it.
I'm looking back at my original tasting notes for this as well, and I've also put down. Do you know? I taste in chocolate bars, sweets, and cereal, and this is all the stuff that I like to list. So I've got Maltesers, Dane Bar. You know, do you get Dane Bars in Ireland?
Oh, Dane Bars, love. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's really nice.
Good Dane Bar. Yeah. I've definitely got some raisin in here, but I've also got, and I couldn't name a brand because I don't eat cereal anymore, not really, like a Fruit Loops cereal.
Yeah.
It's got that kind of cereal quality, but then there's like really sweet, like fruitiness.
Yeah, it's the sweetness that kind of comes through. And yet there's like I find on the palate, there's a chewiness to it. You know, it's almost like a velvety texture from that PX.
Really is. Don't be shy, everyone. Drop your tasting notes in. There are no wrong answers. Let us know what you think of the Writer's Tears. Tell us about the rest of the range. So this is the only single pot still that you have, but what else is? What is Writer's Tears? Like, how would we classify it as a brand?
So, what is it? Good question. So Writer's Tears, I suppose, you know, the short story is, you know, Ireland's golden era of whiskey, kind of that early 19th, 20th century, at the time when I suppose pot still would have probably been the dominant whiskey exported. That time, you know, Ireland was known for its great writers, so Yeats, Joyce, Beckett. That, you know, that literary period of Ireland's history kind of coincided with that great whiskey period. And it said, you know, when they were looking for inspiration, where do you go for inspiration? But you go to the pub. And that when they drank whiskey, they drank so much whiskey that they cried, when their tears, they cried tears of whiskey. So that's kind of the name, you know, kind of a funny story behind Writer's Tears. It's a homage to that time. I suppose the entire range is what we would describe, or was known at that time, as this champagne style of Irish whiskey, which was really, you know, blends didn't exist. Grain whiskey didn't exist back then. We had single pot still and we had single malt. So a blend in those days was taking the best of both and putting it together to make something that was seen as even better, which was this cuvee, this champagne. So it was the single pot still, single malt kind of marriage or vatting. And we have recreated that style in Writer's Tears. So we're the only company really that are driving that style forward. And that's ultimately what Writer's Tears as a range is. It's that kind of marriage, that unique marriage of single pot still, single malt. I suppose the dominant, you know, strand of that for us is that single pot still. So that you know, Rob mentioned it earlier, that, you know, it kind of came about as a creative solution to a tax problem that you know, the Irish didn't want to pay that malted tax. So they discovered happily that unmalted barley was actually a great flavor compound and gave this whole unique experience. So it was a very creative solution. And it was, you know, I suppose the dominant style of that time. So for us, we always felt, when we did Writer's Tears as a range and brought in that kind of marriage, that ultimately single pot still really had that, you know, creative element to it that fits nicely with Writers as a brand. So, you know, we were trying for a while to find that right pot still that would sit, and how we would bring it about, and the casks and all that. And I suppose that's where, you know, Bernard's first love, apart from Rosemary and his kids, but his first work love is, you know, in that exploration. And that was why for us, when we launched this, it was September 21, when we actually finally brought this out. And I mean, that the brand at that stage was, you know, 12, 13 years old. So, you know, it was a long journey to get to a pot still. But you know, we talked earlier about the fact that the number of distilleries and sources for liquid are growing now. So it's for us, there's great variety in who we can work with in terms of sourcing liquid and the quality of the liquid. It's just growing all the time, and it's really exciting in terms of, I suppose, all the permutations you have in terms of the liquid and the casks and everything. So so for us, it was great to bring this out finally in 21. And then, I suppose last year we won 3 gold medals with it, Irish Whiskey Masters, Whiskey Awards, which the Irish Whiskey Awards is probably the most competitive Irish Whiskey Awards globally, because every brand wants to win at home. So, to get a gold for that is fantastic. And then San Francisco, we got gold there as well. So it's nice to have, I suppose, the recognition for it. And, now for us, it's exploring further on that pot still journey. Like, what else can we do? Can we look at the mash bill? Can we look at other casks, what we can do? And, we've some stuff laid down now that we're really excited about bringing out in the future.
Well, I can't wait to see what comes next for the brand, and also on the Irishman as well. They're both amazing brands. If you haven't tried the Irishman yet, go and seek that out, and also seek out some of the other Writers' Tears range as well, so you can really try that single malt with the single pot still combined. And particularly
the Irishman, it's good to know that the Irishman probably leans more heavily on single malt. So as a range, it's got age stated. It's got the, like, I always find, for anyone who's new to whiskey, and I suppose whiskey over the years, I'm more than 6 years here now, and since I started to now, it's fantastic to see the growth and the change in the whiskey drinker. There's more women involved. There's more, it's just fantastic to see the profile has changed completely. And like, I find with the Irishman, because it's single malt, it's for people who are not familiar with whiskey, it's a very easy whiskey to kind of start that journey. It doesn't have really harsh flavor profiles or that deep burn that I suppose people associate sometimes with whiskey when you think of, when you're in college and your only experience with whiskey was that, where people have, developed, I suppose, their palates now. And it's exciting to see the depth of the category from all brands.
It's really exciting. There's, as you say, like, well, as Rob said, the 50 Irish whiskey distilleries now, which is incredible. When I started writing about whiskey, there were 4 distilleries. Cooley had just been sold, and all of these brands were saying, oh, well, we can no longer source any of our whiskey from Cooley because their contracts have been cut off. And that kind of was the start. The match was lit to reignite the Irish whiskey industry, and it was just so exciting to see that happen. And that was, I think, maybe back in 2012. So in the last 10 years, we've gone from 4 distilleries to 50, which is incredible. Now I know, like, one of those distilleries as well was something that the Bernard and Rosemary had started up and sadly had to walk away from. But is a distillery in the pipeline at all, like a new one for them?
I think it's the itch that hasn't been scratched. I mean, our I suppose journey to date has been, a lot of ups and a lot of downs, but a lot of ups, and it's very exciting. And we were involved with Ilva Serono and built their distillery at Royal Oak, which, was phenomenal in that it was, the largest manual distillery. So, and producing all 3 styles, so grain, malt and pot. And it was a phenomenal achievement that Bernard had gotten to that point. And, a real, I suppose, crowning moment for him, and one that we don't shy away from in our journey. In 2019, we did separate from Ilva Serono in terms of we kept the brands, they kept the distillery. So, I suppose there's a sadness in that, there was an opportunity and a huge potential that we saw there in the future, but we've achieved an awful lot, and increased our range and the cask finishes and all that exploration in the last 3 years. And the view is, the hope is, that the distillery piece is something that will be part of our story in the future. It's something definitely for Bernard that he's keen to do. And, we want to see what that looks like. The brands want a home. So I think for us, it's really exciting to see what that could look like. But yeah, that's Bernard's journey at the minute. He's definitely on the hunt.
An exciting time for Walsh Whisky going forward then. Rob, I'm going to bring you back in. If anyone's got any questions for Claire or Rob, we've got roughly about 10 minutes left So pop them in the chat and we'll get around to asking all of your pressing questions. If you've got anything you'd like to know about Irish single pot still, or about the distilleries, or well, I'm going to ask this question because I'm not sure if anyone else will ask it or not. It's quite an important one, and I'd like you to be as honest as possible, if that's okay. I'm going to ask Rob this first. What would be your preferred filling for pancakes today? You got a bit nervous then, didn't you? You're like, oh God, here she comes.
Gonna ask me what my favorite whiskey that isn't Teeling. I'm like, oh no. I actually forgot, like we were talking about this earlier, I forgot it was pancake day. So I was up in the warehouse today, and luckily the ladies up there, really sound, had bought a couple. So I got a cold pancake today with Nutella, and I'm like, well, I mean, that was pretty good. Wouldn't be my first go-to, but considering the circumstances and being looked after by the lovely ladies up in the warehouse, which is a happy place at any given time, today, yeah, I think I'll go with that one. That one, even though it was a cold pancake from a couple hours prior, it was pretty tasty.
Do you know what? I wouldn't turn down a cold Nutella pancake ever. I don't think. It was just, I mean, it's not like my favorite, but if it was offered, obviously, I'm gonna have it.
I think it's a go-to. I mean, that combination of chocolates, yeah. I mean, when you said savory earlier, though, I'm like, oh yeah, that does sound good too, though.
Yeah, it's kind of, but you need a main course pancake and a dessert pancake.
Yeah.
Claire, what are you having?
Well, I'm very enthusiastic about Pancake Tuesday. So I brought my crepe maker to work. So we had pancakes in the office. We don't have like an oven though, so I wasn't able to make like a whiskey sauce. So I'm a lemon and sugar girl. So I had lemon and sugar, but I did also have a Nutella one because, very greedy and had more than one pancake. But yeah, no.
You can't just have one pancake. It's pancake day.
Especially when you bring your crepe maker. I feel like it was on me to be really enthusiastic about the pancakes. So
exactly,
like, okay,
you get everyone into it. Lead by example.
Yeah. I'm a trooper like that.
Yeah, exactly. Lemon and sugar. You can't go wrong with lemon and sugar. It's an absolute. I feel like we were all brought up on lemon and sugar pancakes, unless I'm completely wrong. I certainly was. Nutella wasn't a thing when I was a child. If it was, it's always some disgusting like Tesco value chocolate spread that was at the cupboard.
The first time I remember was those little packs with the little plastic spoon that you got in high school. That was the closest thing, but there's no such thing as the jars at home. Yeah. No one trusted you with that much Nutella.
No. Tabby has a question for both of you. This is probably a more serious one. If there was any type of cask you'd like to use that you haven't yet, what would it be?
Claire, you go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of casks that we haven't yet used. So the potential is huge. I mean, we haven't, I suppose, fully explored maybe wine ranges. We've done a lot of dessert wines, but outside of that, wines, I think we're keen to explore them. And we actually have a very exciting Writers' Tears expression coming out later this year. That is with a different spirit. I won't say more than that, but it's I suppose a very hot topic spirit at the minute, and it's very different for us. Not sweet, I suppose, not going down the sweet route. So it'll be interesting to see the influence on that. That's one I suppose we've probably slightly dragged Bernard along with, in that it's not overly sweet, so he was not sold on it straight away. But I think it's going to be fantastic and really exciting for the brand. And I think the potential, there's so many casks out there that we haven't even touched the surface yet on it.
I'm trying to think what spirit that could be now. It's really intriguing. How exciting. In a way, it almost feels like, I know, we've exhausted the amount of casks that are in the world. We've used everything. Do you think there's still room for flexibility, for innovation?
Oh, I think there is. And I think the guys like Rob will definitely talk about it, but I think Teeling are hugely innovative in things that you wouldn't even think of. Like their Wonder of Wood series is fantastic, but I think you know, he'd probably say the same, haven't even scratched the surface. Like, we have a slide that we use in terms of just explaining to trade and people, you know, the different permutations for whiskey. So from a cereal point of view, malted, unmalted, you know, maize, everything, you know, then the various aging, then the casks, and there's just so many different things you can do and so many options, like to the point that Scotch say oak, we say wood. Wood could be anything. We've used Mizunara, Japanese oak, you know, we've just, there's so much out there that we can do. And that, like, there's probably ones we haven't even thought of yet. And that's what's so exciting about Irish, that there's the potential there to do anything.
Yeah,
they don't always work. We've had ones in the past where it's like, that wasn't great, but you know, it's the exploration is what's like really exciting, and you know, when you find one that you're like, that really works, like that's exciting.
Yeah, totally. All right, Rob, talk to us about cask innovation. What you're up to? What would you like to see done that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, well,
would you use sake like Tabby's edging?
Well,
I know she's on the edge of her seat to try it.
That's a good question. So yeah, we've got Muji Soshu casks. I don't think sake, there's terribly too much barrel aged sake, but there is barrel aged umeshu. So we're looking into umeshu casks. Yeah, I mean, but it's a hard question to answer. We've used 150 at this point at Teeling. Some of them we can use, some of them we can't because of relationships and things behind the scenes. But what we're starting to see now, you know, as Claire was mentioning, these alternate casks are more often than not, they're virgin oak. So as more and more craft spirits companies start to use them, they then become seasoned unique wood casks. Like we got our hands on a Gorda, a 700-liter chestnut cask that previously held PX brandy, so fortified wine from PX grapes. That remarkably different flavor from both the wood perspective and the seasoning. But another thing we're working on, and we do have fantastic relationships with our brokers and the different producers, but starting to work more on that symbiosis. So back and forward. So going to a beer producer, then back to the whiskey, then back to the beer, and then how does that cask evolve? You know, historically, we look at a fourth fill bourbon cask as it's had bourbon in it for X amount of years and Irish whiskey in it for X amount of years, and probably each of those fills were in the double figures. But what if we're talking high impact flavors in the months? You know, a porter for 6 months, and then a tequila cask for 6, then a rum, then whiskey. What variation is happening then? And then we're barely even talking about vatting. So going back to what Claire was saying, the vatting between malt and pot still, you start to vat, you know, look at Jura or Teeling single malt, you know, a vatting of different single malts, you know, you start to bring in some of these different variations. You know, we start to look at it like spices in cooking or bitters in cocktail making. There's a wealth of opportunity out there and a ton of variation when you start to bring them all together.
For a second there, I thought you were suggesting that you fill a cask with stout, then fill it with tequila, then fill it with something else, and then put the whiskey in. And I don't know what a stout flavored tequila flavored whiskey would even start to taste like.
We did. We've done. So we put I think the weirdest one I've done so far was an old tequila barrel that we put whiskey in. Then it went to the beer company, and then it came back to us. That was probably the longest kind of variation that we've done so far. But it's definitely something we're going to look a lot more.
So long as it wasn't stout.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would. I can't imagine. Maybe something like a lager or an IPA would
I think
work.
it was actually a red ale, I believe, like an amber ale. It was the Dot Brew. They're a small craft brewery up the street from us. They do a lot of these collaborations with us. They've done probably about 6 or 7 different barrel finished beers for us at this point. We've done a few of the other end of the spectrum, our beer finished whiskeys, and yeah, they're getting to the point like Alex of like, yeah, just if you ask me for a cask, just assume the answer is yes, I'll take it.
We love Alex. He's a visionary, love him to pieces, as is Bernard, also very innovative and creative. Guys, that's been an hour. Thank you so much for joining us and walking us through your delicious single pot still whiskies. I've learned a lot. about what's going on and how it's made in this wonderful category. I hope everyone watching along has as well. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for Our Whiskey yet, then please do head to OurWhisky.com. And as always, I will give you a wee code. If you sign up, you can get 50% off your first month with Our Whiskey 50. So pause, take a screenshot. If you're on your phone, you could do it on your laptop too, I suppose, but you can always pause and rewind and rewatch this whenever you want. So grab that code, sign up for Our Whiskey, and we'll have more amazing whiskies like this in future. Claire and Rob, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I hope everyone else has enjoyed. And we'll see you again next month for our next whiskey pack, the March pack, which I believe takes us up to number 12. Exciting times. All right, guys, take care. See you later.
Thanks
Becky. Bye.
Bye.